What happens when a Hollywood icon, scarred by years in the spotlight, faces off against a host known for her unyielding candor? The air in the studio hummed with anticipation, a low electric buzz from the overhead lights casting soft shadows across the set. Two armchairs, upholstered in deep navy velvet, sat angled toward each other like old adversaries at a negotiation table. Between them, a low glass coffee table gleamed under the warm glow, holding two untouched glasses of water and a small vase of white lilies, their petals slightly wilted from the heat of the lamps. No grand stage here, just an intimate corner of the studio, flanked by three cameras, a wide angle mounted on a silent track, a midshot trained on the guest's chair, and a close-up hovering near the host. Microphones clipped to collars, their thin wires snaking discreetly down shirts, picked up every breath, every rustle. In the dim periphery, a small studio audience of about 50 sat in tiered seats, their faces illuminated by the faint blue glow of phone screens, whispering among themselves like jurors before a trial. Joy Behar settled into her chair first, crossing her legs with the practiced ease of someone who'd hosted thousands of these conversations. She adjusted her notes on her lap, the paper crinkling softly against her palm. At 60-something, Joy carried the weight of her career in the faint lines around her eyes that had stared down politicians and celebrities alike. But tonight, there was a flicker of something else, a brief memory of her own early days in comedy, the sting of public scrutiny. She tapped her pen once against the armrest, a habit from her stand-up routines, then set it down. The control room murmured faintly through her earpiece, 30 seconds to roll, and she nodded imperceptibly. Johnny Depp arrived moments later, striding in with that signature swagger, his boots echoing faintly on the polished floor. He wore a loose scarf draped around his neck, hiding what might have been a faint scar from some long-ago adventure, and his rings clinked as he shook Joy's hand. The audience offered polite applause, a wave of sound that rolled and faded quickly. Johnny sank into his seat, his posture relaxed but alert, like a pirate captain assessing the deck. Up close, his eyes held a mix of charm and wariness, the kind forged from decades of fame's double-edged blade. He flashed a quick smile, but Joy caught the way his fingers drummed once on the armrest before stilling, a transient tell of the vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "Thank you for being here, Johnny," Joy began, her voice warm and inviting, laced with that Brooklyn edge that made her sound like everyone's no-nonsense aunt. "It's been a while since you've done one of these. How are you feeling tonight?" Johnny leaned back, crossing one ankle over his knee, the fabric of his chair whispering under him. "Oh, you know, Joy, alive and kicking. Grateful to be out of the house, honestly. The world's a mad place, but talking to someone real like you? That's a privilege." His tone was light, almost playful, but there was an undercurrent, a subtle deflection that suggested he was already mapping the conversation's terrain. The audience chuckled softly, a ripple of approval. Joy smiled, nodding as she glanced at her notes. The wide camera pulled back slightly, capturing the easy rapport. "Well, let's start with the good stuff. You've got this new film coming out, tell us about that. What's it like diving back into a role after everything?" Johnny's laugh was low, a rumble that carried through the microphones. "Diving back? More like cannonballing in. It's a story about redemption, you know? A guy who's lost it all and fights to reclaim his soul. Feels timely." He paused, his gaze drifting to the audience for a beat, eliciting a few nods. But Joy noticed the way his thumb traced a ring on his finger, a small, involuntary gesture that hinted at deeper waters. She leaned in slightly, her expression empathetic. "Redemption's a powerful theme. In your life, outside the scripts, family, friends, how do you find that balance? You've spoken before about your kids, how protective you are." The question hung there. Neutral enough, but probing the edges of personal territory. Johnny's smile held, but his eyes narrowed just a fraction. "My kids are everything, Joy. They're the anchor in the storm. I keep them out of this circus as much as I can. Privacy's not just a luxury, it's survival." He delivered it smoothly, an aphorism polished from repetition, but there was a flash, a momentary softening in his voice when he said anchor, as if recalling a quiet moment away from the cameras. The studio lights hummed faintly, and from the control room, a muffled whisper filtered through Joy's earpiece, "Good flow, keep it light." She ignored it, pressing gently. "Survival, that's an interesting word. With your career, the highs and lows, how do you navigate the public's gaze?" Fans adore you, but there's always that flip side. Johnny shifted in his seat, the velvet creaking under him. The gaze? It's a thief sometimes. Steals pieces of you when you're not looking. But I've learned to give what I choose. Control the narrative, or it controls you. His words were declarative, laced with a sardonic edge, and the audience murmured in agreement, a few phones lifting to capture the moment. Joy nodded, her pen tapping once more, a beat of her own internal rhythm. She felt a twinge of fatigue from the long day, but pushed it aside, focusing on the man across from her. Control, that's key for a lot of us in this business. But let's talk about legacy. You've built an incredible one, Captain Jack, Edward Scissorhands. Icons. How do you reflect on that now, especially with recent chapters in your life? The pivot was subtle, narrowing toward the past. Johnny's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but he recovered with a grin. Legacy? It's what people make of it. I've poured my heart into those roles, flaws and all. Recent chapters, well, they've been a battlefield. But I'm still standing, aren't I? He spread his hands, rings catching the light, inviting the audience's applause, which came in a polite swell. A cutaway to the producer off stage, she exchanged a glance with the director, her lips pressing into a thin line. The mid-camera zoomed in on Johnny's face, capturing the faint sheen of sweat under the lights. Joy's question sharpened now, her voice still polite but incisive. Battlefield, strong imagery. In those battles, public ones especially, there's often talk of accountability. How do you see your role in that? Not just as an actor, but as a public figure? Johnny bristled, his fingers curling slightly on the armrest. Accountability? I've faced more scrutiny than most. But let's be real, Joy, the media machine chews people up. I've owned my mistakes, but humility? That's a two-way street. When the world's throwing stones, sometimes you throw back. His reply was compact, a reversal that deflected blame outward, but Joy caught the pause before mistakes, a micro-confession of sorts, his eyes flicking downward for a split second. The audience stirred, a few gasps blending with the hum of the lights. Joy felt the tension coiling, like a script turning toward its climax. She set her notes aside, the paper rustling audibly. Throwing back, fair enough. But on privacy versus exposure, you've built a career on visibility, yet you guard your personal life fiercely. Do you ever worry that platform comes with a price, not just for you, but for those around you? Johnny leaned forward, his scarf shifting to reveal a thin scar along his collarbone, a repeated visual motif that spoke of old wounds. Worry? Every day. Visibility isn't a gift, it's a transaction. And privacy? That's the one thing they can't steal if you hold it tight. But tell me, Joy, haven't you felt that theft yourself? He turned the question back, a sharp deflection, his tone laced with contempt veiled as curiosity. The control room whisper came again, urgent, ease off, ratings are spiking. Joy swallowed, her throat dry, but pressed on, transitioning to the moral frame. I have, sure. But as someone who's been on both sides, I wonder about the ethics of it all. When we wield influence, there's a responsibility. Humility in the face of privilege, does that resonate with you, especially after trials that exposed so much? Johnny's breath hitched. A swallowed laugh escaping as a huff. Privilege? I've earned every scar, Joy. Trauma doesn't discriminate by bank account. And humility? That's code for rolling over. I've been wounded, yes, harassed, dragged through the mud. But authenticity? That's me showing up, flaws and all, not curating some sanitized version for the masses. His words were sardonic now, aphorisms firing like barbs, but there was that flash again, a vulnerable crack in his voice unwounded, his hand trembling slightly before he clenched it. The audience fell silent, phones poised. A crew member off stage shifted, his shoes scuffing the floor. Joy met his gaze, her own eyes steady, drawing on her reservoir of authority. The close-up camera tightened on her face. Authenticity is powerful, Johnny. But when it intersects with consequences, for others, for the narrative you control, doesn't true humility mean acknowledging the full weight? Or is it just another performance? The studio inhaled collectively, the air thick. Johnny's fist tightened on the chair arm, knuckles whitening. The microphone wire sang with a faint twang as he shifted, his chair scraping back an inch. His breath quickened, eyes locking onto hers with a storm brewing behind them. Johnny's breath quickened, eyes locking onto hers with a storm brewing behind them. The studio lights seemed to pulse in the sudden silence, their faint hum amplifying the tension like a heartbeat in a confined space. His fist, still clenched on the velvet armrest, trembled once before he released it, the rings on his fingers catching the glare in a brief, defiant sparkle. Joy held his gaze, her own expression unyielding, a mask of composed authority cracked only by the subtle twitch at the corner of her mouth, a flash of regret, perhaps, or the fatigue of battles fought too many times. Then, with a scrape that echoed like a gunshot in the intimate set, Johnny pushed back his chair. The microphone wire tugged against his collar, emitting a sharp twang that cut through the air. He stood abruptly, his scarf slipping slightly to expose that thin scar along his collarbone once more, a silent testament to wounds both seen and unseen. The audience gasped in unison, a collective inhale that rustled papers and shifted seats. Phones rose like periscopes, screens glowing as fingers tapped furiously to capture the moment. "Enough," Johnny said, his voice low and edged with contempt, not quite a shout but carrying the weight of one. He unclipped his microphone with deliberate slowness, the click audible over the hum, and let it dangle from his hand like a discarded prop. "This isn't an interview, it's an ambush. I've bared my soul in courts and headlines, more than anyone should have to. But you? You sit there with your moral high ground, twisting words for spectacle." His words were short, declarative barbs, laced with the sardonic bite that had defined his public persona, but beneath it, Joy caught the transient vulnerability again, a slight quiver in his lip, eyes glistening for a fraction of a second before he blinked it away. The producer offstage froze, her hand hovering over her clipboard, exchanging a wide-eyed glance with the director. The wide-angle camera pulled back instinctively, framing the scene like a dramatic tableau, Joy still seated, notes in lap, facing the standing figure of Johnny, the coffee table between them now a chasm. A crew member's phone buzzed faintly in the background, ignored amid the unfolding chaos. Joy rose slowly, her chair creaking in response, maintaining her poise even as her heart raced. She set her notes on the table with a soft thud, the glass surface reflecting the overhead lights in distorted patterns. "Johnny, wait, this is about dialogue, not division. Accountability isn't an attack, it's..." But he cut her off with a raised hand, his posture rigid, controlling the narrative one last time. "Dialogue? That's rich coming from someone who profits off other people's pain. Privilege and trauma, you throw those words around like they're yours to judge. I've lived it, Joy. You've just reported on it." He tossed the microphone onto the chair, or it landed with a muffled thump, wire coiling like a snake. The audience murmured, a mix of shock and whispers, "Did he just? Oh my God," rippling through the tears. Without another word, Johnny turned on his heel, boots thudding against the floor as he strode toward the exit. The mid-shot camera swiveled to follow him, capturing the sway of his scarf and the tension in his shoulders. As he passed the edge of the set, he paused briefly, glancing back, not at Joy, but at the audience, his expression a complex brew of defiance and something softer, almost apologetic. Then he was gone, the stage door swinging shut with a definitive click that reverberated through the studio. The immediate aftermath descended like a storm. Joy stood there for a beat, her breath steadying as she smoothed her blouse, the fabric whispering under her fingers. The control room erupted into muffled chaos, voices overlapping through her earpiece. Cut to commercial. Now. Get security, just in case. Ratings are through the roof. She waved off a stagehand who approached with a concerned frown, her mind already racing through the fallout. A memory surfaced unbidden, her own early interviews, the sting of guests walking out, the way it had hardened her resolve. But this felt different, raw, personal. The small studio audience stirred into action, applause mixing with boos in a discordant symphony. A woman in the front row stood, clapping slowly at first, then joined by others who seemed to side with Johnny's exit. Others shook their heads, murmuring disapproval. Phones lit up the dim space like fireflies, tweets already flying, hashtag Johnny Depp Walkout legendary, one screen flashed, while another read, Joy Behar crossed a line, hashtag cancel Joy. The producer rushed on stage, her heels clicking urgently, whispering to Joy, "We need to wrap this." Socials exploding, clips are viral already. Back in the green room, Johnny slumped into a couch, the door locked behind him. His manager hovered nearby, phone in hand, scrolling through notifications that poured in like a digital deluge. "Boss, it's everywhere, TMZ, Twitter, Reddit. Fans are rallying, hashtags trending, hashtag stand with Johnny, hashtag media ambush." Johnny rubbed his temples, the adrenaline fading into a weary ache. He pulled out his own phone, ignoring the barrage of texts, and stared at a photo of his kids, a private anchor in the public tempest. Vulnerability crept in now, unchecked, a deep breath, eyes closing as he whispered to himself, was it worth it? But pride surged back, he'd reclaimed control, even if it meant walking away. Meanwhile, on the set, Joy addressed the cameras as the red light flickered back on for a hasty close. "Well, folks, that was unexpected." Interviews like this remind us that conversations about truth and accountability can be tough. "We'll be right back after this." Her voice remained incisive, polite, but inside, a flash of doubt. Had she pushed too far for spectacle, or held the line for ethics? The audience filed out, buzzing with excitement, snippets of conversation floating. He looked so hurt. She was just doing her job. As the studio emptied, the fallout spread outward. Social media ignited into a firestorm, polarized as the guest himself. Threads dissected every line. Johnny's right, privacy is sacred. Hashtag boycott the View versus Joy called out entitlement. About time. Hashtag accountability matters. Clips of the walkout racked up millions of views within hours, memes proliferating, Johnny's scarf photoshopped onto superheroes, Joy's pen tap turned into a viral gif. News outlets pounced, Variety headlined Depp storms out of Behar interview, clash over legacy, while TMZ speculated on behind-the-scenes drama. Gendered double standards bubbled up in comments. If she were a man, they'd call it tough journalism, instead, she's aggressive. Others highlighted authenticity, he's performing victimhood, curated trauma for sympathy. In her dressing room, Joy watched the storm unfold on her laptop, the screen's glow casting harsh shadows on her face. A producer knocked, entering with a tablet. "Joy, the network's thrilled viewership spiked 40%. But PR's fielding calls, some sponsors are nervous." She nodded, tapping her pen absent-mindedly. The rhythm a small comfort. A text from a colleague, "You okay?" That was intense. She replied briefly, then paused, reflecting on the themes that had unraveled the night: control slipping through fingers, privilege masking wounds, media's tightrope between responsibility and ratings. Fatigue washed over her, but so did a quiet resolve. She'd exposed a crack in the facade, for better or worse. Across town, Johnny boarded a car, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. His phone vibrated incessantly, but he silenced it, leaning back with a sigh. The walkout had been impulsive, a bid to reclaim narrative from exposure's grasp, but now the consequences loomed, potential backlash from projects, fans divided. Yet, in the quiet, a resonant truth emerged. He'd shown authenticity in his exit, raw and uncurated, vulnerability laid bare not in words, but in action. A message from his daughter popped up. Dad saw the clip. "You good?" He smiled faintly, typing back, "Better now. Love you." The night wound down with thematic echoes rippling into the ether. For Joy, it was a reminder of media ethics' double bind: pursue truth, risk spectacle. She poured a glass of water, the clink of ice mirroring the studio's earlier microsounds, and vowed to approach the next interview with tempered sharpness, fairness over fireworks. For Johnny, the walkout crystallized privilege and trauma's tension. Wounded yet empowered, he'd chosen exposure on his terms, humility found not in concession, but in departure. As dawn crept over the city, the story faded from trending lists, but its subtext lingered, a cautionary drama of control lost and regained, authenticity tested in the glare of lights. The chipped porcelain cup from the green room, forgotten in the rush, sat on a table, its flaw a quiet symbol of imperfect narratives. In the end, neither won the battle. Instead, they both exposed the human cost of public performance, leaving the audience and themselves to grapple with the unresolved weight of it all.